Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video in our ever-going movie review series of Unrated and Underappreciated series, and this edition we will focus on Spike Lee's cool jazz drama Mo Better Blues. Released on August the 3rd, 1990, it stars Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes, Robin Harris, Ruben Blades, John Tuturro, Bill Nunn, and also a supporting role for Spike Lee himself, who also directed the movie. It also has very early cameo roles for Samuel L. Jackson, Giancarlo Esposito, and also Joie. Now the setup within Mo Better Blues is that we follow the story of Bleek Gillian, who is an accomplished trumpet player who's in charge of a jazz band known as the Bleek Quintet, and we follow this character through his various successes and dilemmas that he goes through. We see he's caught up in relationships with two women. His best friend Joie is his manager, who for the most part is seemingly incompetent in managing the band and getting them the earnings that they deserve, but Bleek remains loyal to his best friend. Bleek also has problems with the band where the members don't feel rewarded for their performances and are always asking for a raise, and there are constant debates about the style of play. Very much self-centered, we see Bleek go through certain highs and lows. He gets humbled and he learns where really his priorities should really lie within his life. Now for me, Mo Better Blues is a very watchable, very cool and entertaining movie. Okay, it does move at a very leisurely pace and there may not be a central focal point in terms of the story, but this is very much of a character driven piece added by very classy jazz music and very much of a measured, stylized direction from Spike Lee. This is a film that is very gorgeous to look at in terms of its lighting and its editing, and it's a nice ebb and flow in terms of the tone and direction of the movie and the sequences that we see. It's overall a very composed and sophisticated drama from Spike Lee as a director. And this was really when he was, for me, in his peak run as a filmmaker. He started off career with the likes of She's Got to Have It, and then he really hit major highs throughout his directorial career early on with the very powerful and influential Do the Right Thing, the very controversial and very compelling Jungle Fever, the exceptional Malcolm X, and also with Mo Better Blues. So this was a time when I think Spike Lee was really making a lot of movies that really mattered, and a lot of his movies had managed to strike very much of a chord within African American audiences. Now for me, what helps to maintain the watchability of Mo Better Blues are the performances and the characterization. In the lead role as Bleek, Denzel Washington shows as always how he can effortlessly provide a very watchable presence to help carry a movie. We see here that Bleek is quite a divisive character, which makes him very interesting. We see how much of a perfectionist he is. Very early on in the scenes, he's constantly obsessing with his craft. His skills have been driven into him ever since he was a young boy. We see this at the film's beginning sequence where his father is teaching him how to play the trumpet, and then we see kids outside calling for him to come and play outside, but his father's very disciplinary at the time and asks him whether he wants to be something of some note or whether he just wants to go out and just be with his mates overall. So that very hardened discipline is driven to him very much at a young age. We get very slick edited scenes where we see Bleek looking over his lyrics, doing it very much these mouth exercises, practicing his notes, and it's a very fascinating insight into the life of a musician and how much they really have to dedicate to themselves to perfecting their craft. Now Bleek has far less of a likability when we see him playing two women overall. One of them is Clark, who's very stunningly hot, very attractive, and she's very demanding of Bleek's attention. She has her own ambitions of being a singer and she wants to join Bleek's band, but he dismisses her straight away, so he has that very selfish outlook about her, and she's very well played by Cyndia Williams, who also does a very fine job in terms of performing the music and certain songs throughout the film as well. The other woman in Bleek's life is Indigo, who is played by Spike Lee's sister Joie, and she's far less of a demander but seems to have much more of honesty and a modesty about her, and we see Bleek mistreat both women in certain instances. When he buys them the same dress, we have that scene where they turn up together to watch him and they turn up in both a red dress. So Bleek is a very unsympathetic character, so it helps that we have other interesting characters around him to also bolster the story, and I think both Cyndia Williams and Joie provide very good, very vocal performances as the females within Bleek's life. One of the best performances does actually come from the director himself, Spike Lee. As Joie, the band's manager, he's very incompetent in getting the band the bigger gigs and negotiations, and we see that early scenes where he talks to the likes of the managers, Nicholas Tuturro as well, and we have great scenes where we see Joie really much more of a chancer, and we learn that he has very much of a massive gambling issue and addiction. We see earlier scenes where he's talking to the loan shark played by Ruben Blades, and Spike Lee evokes a certain amount of charisma and much more of an eccentric character. He's always quoting 2 times when he put in these outlandish wagers and bets. This adds a lot of the humour, I think, throughout the movie. We see him later on, he's always from the run from the certain henchman. We see Samuel L. Jackson in an early role. So it's a really good, funny and very comic performance, I would say, from Spike Lee. There's certain digs about his height and how short he is, and again, that's just very much of a self-depreciating performance from him. So I very much like Spike Lee's performance throughout this film, and I always think it's an impressive job that a director can also be an actor in their own film. We also have Wesley Snipes as Shadow, who's always pressing Bleek for the band members to get a raise in their pay. He's constantly clashing with Bleek because he disagrees very much over the style of music. Bleek wants to go for that much more of that jazz traditional style that's very convoluted, while Shadow feels they should simplify things and play much more for contemporary style for audiences. And I love the early scenes that we have between the two when they very much come together and they're clashing all the time. It's a very intense performance from Wesley Snipes, and this was really when he was very much in the early part of his career, when he was playing much more of character driven roles before later on becoming much more of a action movie stars later on within the 90s. I also liked Giancarlo Esposito's character as well. Despite a very small role, he was always making me laugh because he's always late and he's always noting about it, but the band members never pick him up on the fact that he's always late for their practice sessions. They just take it as normal. So I always like that. There's a very nice line in humour, and I love the certain camaraderie and the banter and the arguments between the band. It's very much reflective of what you would expect to see from a band of talented musicians. Yes, there's moments of humour and they do get along together very well, but there's also times of argument and tension throughout, and I just think it's another good insight into what we see within musicians, whether it be a jazz band or a rock band as well. So I think all actors involved portray this element of life within music really well. We also have to talk about the music, which I think is so crucial in lending such an easygoing and comfortable feel to this movie. The jazz music for the most part is provided by acclaimed jazz band Branford Marsalis Quartet, and it's such a classy, smooth soundtrack, so cool and listenable throughout the movie. There are certain standout scenes where we get much more of a pop, almost rap element of a soundtrack at near the beginning of the movie, where we have Denzel and Wesley kind of intercutting each other. We have throughout the movie certain sequences where Shadow is almost grandstanding and he's overloading with the solos, playing 2-3 hour solos as Giant remarks on him, and he's constantly telling him that he has to remove him from the band. And of course we have the centerpiece standout, which is the title track, Mo Better Blues. It goes on for about 2.5 to 3 minutes long, and it's such a great scene, just such a classy moment where we just see the band performing. There's no overall histrionics, we just see them performing and we see the reactions of the crowd within the jazz bar around it, and it's just a magnificent, I think, central song towards the movie. I also like where we get much more of a hyper edited style concerning the fate of Giant and the band that playing at this fast and furious pace, and we see the drummer and the piano and the bass player all thumping really hard, and we see Bleek really blowing the trumpet horns really loudly and really sweating profusely overall. It's a very much intense scene, intercutting as well with Giant as his misdemeanors finally catch up with him. It's fantastic editing and really quite probably the most intense sequence throughout the movie. So if I had to give an overall score for Mo Better Blues, I would give it a 7.8 out of 10. So when we look at the overall release of Mo Better Blues, on a budget of around 10 million, it only managed to gross around 16 million within the United States. Now, when you have a movie about jazz, it really isn't what I would call big box office material, especially when it focuses so much on the music and the artistry and the craft itself. It's not very sensationalistic. Yes, we do get the romanticized love stories, but those are not overall the focal point within the story. It is really much more about individual who's very selfish and very particular about his skill set, and I think maybe it was too orientated towards the jazz and the music, and that's maybe why it didn't attract to mainstream audiences overall. Jazz is not what I would say is a mainstream music genre, particularly in the 90s overall, so that's another reason why perhaps it didn't connect with audiences massively at the box office. Now, of course, people will point out that yes, it has the trio of Denzel Washington, Samuel L. Jackson and Wesley Snipes, who of course nowadays are true iconic black actors for me, and I think for a lot of people within generations. But you have to understand, at this stage of their careers, they are still relatively at the beginning of their profiles, and they're still building their way through their body of work, so they didn't quite have the same box office power and star image that they would have now. Now, if you had a movie released now starring all three actors and it was directed by Spike Lee, it would infinitely make more money than what we would have at Mo Better Blues, and that's to be expected because there's a certain legacy that is left within all of three actors and the roles that they've been playing in for the last 15 to 20 years. There was also a slight comparison from Spike Lee's previous movie Do the Right Thing, which is such an electrifying and very powerful and provocative movie, so I think some audiences were expecting so much of the same, but I credit Spike Lee for really trying a different genre and not try to recreate a certain movie that broke him out within critical audiences as well, so I respect Spike Lee for that as well. But it is a shame, I feel, that Mo Better Blues doesn't really get the same amount of recognition when we talk about Spike Lee. It's always about Do the Right Thing or Malcolm X, but we never truly get the same recognition for Mo Better Blues, and I think it's a shame because I do think it's a very sophisticated and classy movie. I love all the musical scores, and it really is propelled by great performances for all the cast involved. So Mo Better Blues is a film that I feel definitely deserved much more recognition and appreciation both during and post its release as well. So a very fine movie from Spike Lee. So those are my thoughts and feelings and review on Mo Better Blues. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've already seen the movie, let me know what you think about it. Do you think it's amongst Spike Lee's best, or do you think it doesn't compare as well to those earlier films that I mentioned before when he was truly at the peak of his career? Would you like to see Spike Lee go back to that sort of era and style of filmmaking that we saw from Mo Better Blues very later on in his career, or do you think his movies have progressed far more than what we saw early on within this era of films that he was making before? If you've yet to see the movie, I highly recommend it, and if you do, let me know in the comments what you think about it, and if there's other movies within this era of Spike Lee movies that you'd like to see me review, then just let me in the comments as well, and I'll provide those as well. Also, please hit those like and subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.